Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here with me today. Are you learning English? Maybe you can read well, maybe you understand a lot when you listen, and maybe you can even speak and write. But is there something missing? Do you ever find yourself listening to someone speak English, understanding the words, but then translating everything back into your own language in your head before you really get it? Or when you want to say something, do you think of it in your native language first and then try to translate it word for word into English? If you said yes to any of that, you are not alone. So many English learners experience this. It's like your brain is working extra hard, doing two jobs at once, thinking in your language, and then trying to switch everything to English. It can be tiring, right? And sometimes it makes speaking feel slow or a little bit unnatural. But what if I told you there's a way to make it easier? What if you could start to think directly in English? Imagine how that would feel. Conversations would flow more smoothly. Understanding movies or songs would become more effortless. Expressing your amazing ideas would be quicker and more natural. That's what we're going to explore together. Not just in this segment, but over our time together, we're going to build a path step by step towards thinking in English. This isn't about magic. It's about practice, simple techniques, and changing some old habits. And the best part, you can start today with small, simple changes. So grab a cup of tea or coffee, get comfortable, and let's begin this exciting journey. Our big question for today and for the journey ahead is, how can we learn to think in English? First things first, let's talk about why thinking in English is so important. Why should you even want to do this? Well, the biggest reason is fluency. When you think directly in English, you can speak more fluently. You don't have that delay, that little pause while your brain translates. The words just come. It's like driving a car. When you first learn, you think about every single action. Clutch, gear, accelerator. But with practice, you just drive. Thinking in English is like that. You just speak. Another reason is naturalness. Languages are not just words. They have a rhythm, a flow, a certain way of putting ideas together. When you translate directly from your native language, your English can sometimes sound a little bit stiff, or not quite like how a native speaker would say it. This is because sentence structures, idioms, and common phrases are often very different from one language to another. When you start thinking in English, you start to absorb these natural patterns. Your English will sound more English. Thinking in English also helps you understand better and faster. If you're constantly translating in your head while someone is talking, you might miss the next thing they say. But if your brain is already in English mode, you can process what you hear much more quickly and deeply. You'll catch nuances, humor, and emotions more easily. And finally, a really big one, confidence. When you can think and respond in English, without that internal translation battle, you'll feel so much more confident in your abilities. This confidence will encourage you to speak more, to engage in more conversations, and that in turn will improve your English even further. It's a wonderful, positive cycle. So the benefits are clear. More fluency, more natural-sounding English, better understanding, and a big boost in confidence. Sounds good, right? Now, the big question is, how do we get there? The very first, and perhaps most important, hurdle we need to understand is the translation habit. Think about it. When you first learned English, you probably learned by matching English words to words in your own language. Apple means this in my language. Good morning means that. This is a natural starting point. It's how we build our initial vocabulary. Our brain creates these little bridges between our native language and English. But as we get better, these bridges can actually slow us down if we rely on them too much for everything. We want to eventually build direct roads in English without always going back through our native language. Breaking the translation habit is key. It won't happen overnight, and that's okay. It's a process. The goal is to gradually reduce the amount of translation you do in your head. So, what's the very first practical step you can take? It's beautifully simple. Start small. Think in single words and short phrases. Yes, that's it. Don't try to think entire complex philosophical arguments in English from day one. That would be like trying to run a marathon before you can even walk. Instead, begin by looking around you, right now. What do you see? A table? Think the word table in English. A window? Think window. A pen? Pen. Computer. Light. Book. Do this throughout your day. When you pick up your phone, think phone. When you drink water, think water. You're not saying it out loud. Unless you want to, you're just making that connection in your mind directly in English. Once you're comfortable with single words, move to very short, simple phrases. When you wake up, good morning, think it to yourself. When you make breakfast, making coffee, eating toast. When you see the weather, it's sunny or it's raining. These are tiny thoughts, almost automatic. But by consciously thinking them in English, you are training your brain. You are telling it, hey, we can use English for these little things too. This might seem too simple, but trust me, it's the foundation. You're building a new habit. New pathway in your brain. Every time you think a simple word or phrase directly in English, you are strengthening that pathway. Okay, so you're starting to label things in your mind in English. What's next? Our second step is to narrate your day silently in simple English. This is like taking that first step, thinking in words and short phrases, and expanding it a little. As you go about your daily activities, try to describe what you are doing or what is happening in simple English sentences in your head. For example, I am waking up. I need to brush my teeth. I am walking to the kitchen. I am making tea. Or, I'm making tea. The water is hot. I am going to work. Or, I am starting my studies. I am reading an email. This food is good. Again, keep it simple. Don't worry about perfect grammar at this stage. If you think, I go to shop, instead of, I am going to the shop, that's okay for now. The goal is to get your internal monologue, that little voice in your head, to start using English. You can also describe what you see or hear. The birds are singing. That car is red. My neighbor is walking his dog. You can even narrate your feelings or thoughts. I feel tired. I am happy today. I need to remember to buy milk. This internal narration does a few wonderful things. First, it forces you to actively search for English words and simple sentence structures for everyday things. Second, it makes English a part of your normal daily thought process, not just something you use for study time. Third, it's private. No one can hear you, so there's no fear of making mistakes. It's a safe space to practice. Try it for just 5 or 10 minutes at a time. a few times a day. Maybe when you're commuting or doing chores or waiting in line. You'll be surprised how quickly you start to find the English words for your daily life. And when you don't know a word, that's a great opportunity. Make a mental note or even a quick written note to look it up later. This is how your active vocabulary grows. Now, speaking of looking up words, this brings us to our third foundational technique. Use an English-to-English dictionary. Many of us, when we learn a new English word, immediately look for its translation in our native language. This is helpful at the beginning, as we said. But to really start thinking in English, it's incredibly powerful to switch to an English-English dictionary, especially one designed for learners. Why? Because when you look up an English word and get its definition in English, you stay in English mode. You are not jumping back to your native language. You see the new word, and then you see other English words explaining it. This helps you build connections between English words. You start to understand words in context through other English, words you might already know. For example, if you look up the word enormous, a bilingual dictionary might just give you the one-word translation. But an English Learner's Dictionary might say extremely large or very, very big. So now you connect enormous with large and big, words you probably already understand. You're building a web of meaning, all within English. This also helps you understand the nuances of words. Sometimes a word in your language might have several English translations, each with a slightly different meaning or usage. An English dictionary will give you example sentences, showing you how the word is typically used. This is gold for understanding and for learning to think naturally in English. We've talked about those foundational steps, starting small with words and phrases, narrating your day internally, and using an English-to-English dictionary. These are your building blocks. But what happens when you're trying to use these, trying to think in English, and suddenly, blank? The word just isn't there. Or perhaps you start to form a sentence in your head, and you get stuck, unsure how to continue. This is a very common experience, and it can be frustrating. So, let's address this directly. What do you do when you hit a mental block while trying to think in English? The first thing to remember is, don't panic. It's normal. Even native speakers sometimes search for words. The key is to have a few strategies ready. One very useful technique is called circumlocution. That's a fancy word, but it simply means talking around the word you can't find. Instead of stopping your thought process, try to describe the word or idea using other words you do know. For example, let's say you're thinking about your day and you want to think about the object you use to unlock your door, but the word key just won't come to mind. Instead of getting stuck on key, you could think, I need to find that small metal thing. You put it in the lock to open the door. See? You've kept your thought going in English, and you've successfully described the concept. Often, by describing it, the actual word might even pop into your head. This is fantastic practice because it forces you to be creative with the English you already have. Another approach is to use a simpler word or phrase. If you're trying to think of a complex word like procrastinate, but it's not coming, you could think put things off or delay doing something. The meaning is similar enough to keep your thoughts flowing. The goal here is to maintain that internal English monologue, not necessarily to use the most sophisticated vocabulary all the time, especially in the beginning. Sometimes you might just not know the word at all. In that case, mentally flag it. Make a note in your mind. I don't know the English word for this thing I use to wash dishes. And then later, when you have a moment, you can look it up. The important part is not to let that one missing word derail your entire effort to think in English for that period. Acknowledge the gap, plan to fill it later, and move on with your internal narration using the words you do know. This leads us to another crucial point: embracing mistakes and imperfection. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes, even in their own heads. They want every thought to be grammatically perfect, but this desire for perfection can actually stop you from practicing. Remember, when you're learning to think in English, you are in a practice zone. Your mind is your private language laboratory. Mistakes are not failures. They are learning opportunities. Every time you realize you've thought something in a way that isn't quite right, or when you later learn the correct way to phrase something you struggled with, that's a valuable lesson. Your brain is making new connections. Think about how children learn their first language. They make countless mistakes. They say things like, "I go to the park," instead of, "I went to the park." Do adults correct them harshly and tell them to stop talking until they are perfect? No, they understand it's part of the learning process. You need to give yourself that same kindness and patience. The goal of thinking in English is initially to get the internal conversation going, to switch your brain into English mode. Fluency and accuracy will improve with time and practice. If you wait for perfection before you even try to think in English, you might never start. So, allow yourself to make those mental mistakes. The important thing is that you are trying and you are using English in your mind. This mindset shift, from fearing mistakes to seeing them as helpful guides, is incredibly powerful. It frees you up to experiment, to play with the language in your head. And that's when real learning and internalizing happen. Now, let's move on to a more active way to immerse your mind in English: the power of active listening. We all listen to English, maybe songs, movies, podcasts, or conversations. But there's a difference between passively hearing English and actively listening to it with the goal of improving how you think in the language. Active listening in this context means listening not just for the general meaning, but for how things are said. Pay attention to sentence structure. How are ideas connected? What kind of sentence patterns do you hear frequently? For example, how do native speakers ask questions? How do they express agreement or disagreement? Common phrases and collocations. Collocations are words that often go together, like make a decision, not do a decision, or heavy rain, not strong rain. When you listen actively, you start to pick up on these natural pairings. Intonation and rhythm. English has its own music. The way voices rise and fall, the way words are stressed, these are all part of the language. Trying to notice these patterns can help your own internal English voice sound more natural. Fillers and conversational markers. Listen for how people use words like well, like. While you don't want to overuse these, understanding how they are used in natural speech can help you process conversations better and even make your own internal monologue feel more like real speech. How can you practice active listening? 1. Great way is to choose short audio or video clips. Maybe a minute or two from a podcast, a scene from a TV show, or a short news report. Listen to it multiple times. The first time, just try to get the main idea. The second time, listen for specific vocabulary, or phrases you find interesting or new. The third time, pay attention to the sentence structure or the intonation. You could even try to shadow the speaker. That is, try to repeat what they are saying just slightly after them, mimicking their pronunciation and intonation as best you can. This is an intense exercise, but very effective for internalizing speech patterns. When you listen actively, you're not just taking in information, you're absorbing the way English works, the way thoughts are formed and expressed. This feeds directly into your ability to think in English because you're filling your mind with authentic examples. Building on this idea of immersion, our next point is about using your interests and hobbies to think in English. This is where learning to think in English can become really fun and effortless because you're combining it with something you already love. Think about what you enjoy doing in your free time. Do you like cooking? Start looking for recipes in English. As you read the recipe, think through the steps in English. First, I need to chop the onions. Next, I will heat the oil in the pan. Do you enjoy video games? Try playing a game in English or watch streamers who play and commentate in English. Are you a sports fan? Read sports news in English. Listen to English commentary for matches. Think about the game in English. That was a great goal. The team needs to defend better. Do you love music? Find the lyrics to your favorite English songs and read them while you listen. Try to understand the meaning. Think about what the singer is expressing in English. Maybe you're interested in gardening, history, science, fashion, technology. Whatever it is, there is a huge amount of content available in English on that topic. When you engage with your hobbies in English, you're learning vocabulary and phrases that are relevant and interesting to you. This makes them easier to remember. More importantly, you're creating situations where you naturally want to think in English to understand and enjoy your hobby. For example, if you're following instructions for a craft project in English, you'll be thinking through the steps in English. If you're watching a tutorial video about something you're passionate about, you'll be processing the information in English. This isn't study time, this is enjoyment time. That also happens to be fantastic practice for thinking in English. This kind of natural immersion is incredibly powerful. It takes English out of the textbook and puts it into your real life. You start to associate English not just with lessons and exercises, but with pleasure, interest, and engagement. This positive association makes your brain more receptive to learning and using the language. So make a list of your hobbies and interests. Then, for each one, brainstorm how you could bring more English into it. Could you join an online forum in English related to your hobby? Could you watch documentaries or YouTube channels about it in English? Could you read articles or blogs? Every little bit of exposure, every moment you spend processing information related to your interests in English helps to strengthen those neural pathways for thinking in English. It makes the language feel less foreign and more like a natural tool for exploring your passions. These strategies, managing mental blocks, embracing mistakes, active listening, and immersing yourself through hobbies, build upon the foundational steps we discussed earlier. They help you move from simply thinking individual words to forming more complex thoughts and internal narratives in English. They also make the process more resilient and enjoyable. Remember, the aim is to gradually shift your internal default language for certain situations, and eventually for more and more of your thinking. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but every step, every conscious effort moves you closer to that goal. which is vital for making your own thoughts in English sound and feel natural. So you're starting to notice how English sentences are built, the patterns, the rhythm, the common ways ideas are linked together. That's an excellent step forward. But how do we take that observation, that passive understanding, and turn it into something we actively do within our own minds? How do we start building our own thoughts using these structures? This is where we move from just absorbing English to consciously constructing with it, internally at first. Think of it like this. You've watched a chef cook many times. That's your active listening and reading. Now, you're going to start trying to put the ingredients together yourself in your mind, even if you're not presenting the dish to anyone yet. One way to begin is by taking the simple sentence patterns you frequently hear or read and consciously trying to use them when you're narrating your day or having those internal monologues. For example, you might notice that many English sentences follow a subject-verb-object pattern. I drink coffee. She reads a book. They play football. Start by deliberately forming your own simple thoughts this way. I see a bird. He drives a car. We eat dinner. Then start playing with these basic patterns. How can you make them a question? Do I see a bird? How can you make them negative? I do not see a bird. How can you add more detail? I see a small blue bird on the tree. You're not trying to invent incredibly complex sentences immediately. Instead, you're practicing the fundamental mechanics of English sentence construction in your head. This mental sentence building is like doing little exercises for your brain, strengthening its ability to assemble thoughts in English. Pay attention to common question words. Who, what, where, when, why, how. When you're observing something, try to form a question about it in your mind using these words. What is that person doing? Where are they going? Why is that dog barking? This constant, low-pressure practice of forming simple questions and statements helps to make these structures automatic. Another incredibly important aspect of thinking more naturally in English is to start thinking in chunks or collocations, rather than just individual words. We've touched on collocations, words that frequently go together. Chunks are similar. They are groups of words that native speakers often use as a single unit. For example, instead of thinking word by word, I am going to the shop. A more natural English thinker processes it as a chunk. I'm going to the shop. Or phrases like, on the other hand, as far as I know, take a look, makes sense. By the way, why are these chunks so important for thinking in English? Because they make your thoughts, and eventually your speech, flow much more smoothly and sound more natural. If you're always trying to piece together sentences word by individual word, it's like trying to build a Lego model one tiny brick at a time without ever looking at how larger sections are pre-assembled. Using chunks is like grabbing those pre-assembled sections. It's faster and more efficient. How do you learn to think in chunks? You identify them through your active listening and reading. When you hear a phrase that seems to be used often, or when words just sound right together, make a mental note. People say make a decision, not do a decision. Then actively try to use these chunks in your internal narration and mental sentence building. So, if you're thinking about a choice you need to make, consciously try to think, I need to make a decision about this. The more you practice recalling and using these chunks in your thoughts, the more readily they will come to mind. It's about training your brain to retrieve these blocks of language, not just single words. As you Get more comfortable narrating your day and thinking in simple sentences and chunks. You can take it a step further by creating internal dialogues. This is like moving from being a narrator of your own life to being an actor in a mental play. You imagine simple conversations in English happening entirely in your head. You can play both sides of the conversation. For example, imagine you're ordering food at a restaurant. Think, "Hello, I'd like to order." Then think the waiter's response, "Certainly, what would you like?" Then your reply, "I'll have the chicken salad, please," and so on. Or imagine asking for directions. Your thought, "Excuse me, can you tell me how to get to the post office?" Imagined response, "Yes, go straight for 2 blocks and turn left. It's next to the bank." Your thought, "Thank you very much." You can practice these internal dialogues for all sorts of everyday situations. A simple greeting with a neighbor, buying something in a shop, talking about the weather, making a simple phone call. Keep the imagined conversation simple at first. The goal is not to have profound philosophical debates in your head, but to practice the give and take of conversation, the common questions and responses. Why is this so helpful? Because it prepares you for real-life interactions. It helps you anticipate what others might say and how you might respond. It gets you used to forming questions and answers quickly in English. It also helps you internalize conversational flow and common phrases used in specific contexts. This mental rehearsal makes it much less daunting when you actually find yourself in those situations. You've already practiced it in the safe space of your own mind. Now, all this internal work, narrating, thinking in chunks, having mental dialogues, is fantastic. But to really solidify your ability to think in English and to bridge the gap towards speaking, it's highly beneficial to take one more step. Start talking to yourself out loud in English. Yes, it might feel a little strange or even silly at first. Many people feel self-conscious even when they're alone, but try to find a private space. When you're at home by yourself, in the shower, while cooking, or even when you're driving alone. And just start verbalizing some of those thoughts you've been having internally. What can you talk about? Anything? Narrate what you're doing. Okay, now I'm washing the dishes. This water is warm. I need to scrub this plate a bit harder. Express your opinions about something. I really liked that movie I watched last night. The main actor was very good. Or, I don't think this is the best way to do this. Talk about your plans. Later today, I need to go to the supermarket. I have to buy milk, bread, and some fruit. You can even retell a story you read or a piece of news you heard in your own simple English words. Why is speaking out loud, even to yourself, so important? First, it gets you used to the physical act of producing English sounds and forming English sentences with your mouth and vocal cords. Thinking is one thing, but actually speaking engages different parts of your brain and body. Second, it allows you to hear your own English. This is valuable because you can start to self-correct. You might say something and think, that didn't sound quite right. And then you can try saying it a different way. Third, it helps to reduce the inhibition and fear of speaking. If you can get comfortable speaking English when no one else is listening, it makes it much less scary to speak when other people are around. You're building confidence in a low-stakes environment. Don't worry about making mistakes when you talk. To yourself. Again, this is your private practice time. The goal is to get the words flowing, to practice retrieving vocabulary and assembling sentences in real time, even if it's a bit slow or imperfect at first. The more you do it, the easier and more natural it will become. You're essentially creating your own personal English immersion environment. This progression, from consciously building simple mental sentences to thinking in natural chunks, to having internal dialogues, and finally to speaking those thoughts out loud to yourself, creates a strong pathway. Each step builds on the last, making your internal English richer and more active. You are actively training your brain to operate in English, to make it a language of thought, not just a subject you study. And this internal fluency is the bedrock upon which confident spoken English is built. This consistent, active engagement with the language in various forms is what truly starts to shift your default mode of thinking. And as you continue these practices, you'll find English words and phrases coming to you more spontaneously, more effortlessly, more spontaneously, more effortlessly. And as this happens, you'll naturally want to expand the range of what you can think about in English. It's like exploring a new city. First, you learn the main streets, then you start venturing into the smaller alleys and discovering hidden gems. To do this effectively with your thoughts, you need to be strategic about how you grow your active vocabulary. The words you can actually use when thinking and speaking, not just the words you recognize when reading. Simply memorizing lists of words is often not enough to make them readily available for your thoughts. To truly own a new word and be able to use it spontaneously, you need to connect with it more deeply. When you encounter a new English word, don't just look up its translation. As we've discussed, use an English dictionary to understand its meaning within the context of other English words. But then, take it further. Try to find or create several example sentences that use the new word in a way that's meaningful to you. If the example sentences in the dictionary are too abstract, make up your own. For instance, if you learn the word efficient, don't just memorize able to work well without wasting time or energy. Think about how it applies to your life. You could think, my new study method is very efficient. Or, I need to find a more efficient way to organize my files. By creating these personal connections, the word becomes more memorable and more likely to pop into your head when you're thinking about relevant situations. Another powerful technique is to connect new words to words you already know in English. Is the new word a synonym, similar meaning, or an antonym, opposite meaning, of a word you're familiar with? Is it related in some other way? For example, if you learn delighted, you might connect it to happy, but note that delighted often implies a stronger or more joyful feeling. Building these mental maps between words helps you create a richer, more interconnected vocabulary network in your mind, making it easier to retrieve the right word when you need it for your thoughts. Now, with an expanding vocabulary, how can you deliberately practice using it in your thinking? This is where using thinking prompts can be very effective. A thinking prompt is simply a topic or a question that you give yourself to think about in English for a specific period. It's like giving your brain a mini assignment. You can set a timer for, say, 5 or 10 minutes, choose a prompt, and then just let your thoughts flow in English around that topic. What kind of prompts can you use? Keep them simple and relatable to your life, especially at first. For example, what did I do yesterday? Try to recall and narrate in as much detail as possible in English. What are my plans for this weekend? Describe my favorite room in my house. What is my opinion on a simple current event or a general topic like cats versus dogs or coffee versus tea? If I could travel anywhere, where would I go and why? What am I grateful for today? The purpose of these prompts is to give your English thinking some focus and direction. Instead of just passively hoping English thoughts will occur, you are actively initiating them. During this focused thinking time, try to use the vocabulary you've been learning. Try to form complete sentences. Don't worry if it's slow or if you have to search for words. The effort itself is the practice. You're challenging your brain to operate in English on demand. To make this practice truly effective, it's crucial to build it into a routine. Like any skill, learning to think in English benefits immensely from consistency. It's better to practice for 10 minutes every day than for 2 hours once a week. When something becomes a habit, it requires less willpower and becomes almost automatic. Think about parts of your day where you could consistently dedicate a few minutes to English thinking. Maybe during your morning commute? Instead of just listening to music, you could use a thinking prompt. Perhaps while you're doing chores like washing dishes or folding laundry. These are often times when your hands are busy, but your mind is free. Maybe for a few minutes before you go to sleep. You could reflect on your day in English. Some people find it helpful to use if-then planning. For example, if I am waiting in line at the supermarket, then I will describe the people around me in English in my head. Or, if I finish my lunch, then I will spend 5 minutes thinking about my afternoon plans in English. By linking your English thinking practice to existing daily routines, you create triggers that help you remember to do it, making it more likely to become a strong habit. As you make thinking in English a regular habit, it's also important to set small, achievable goals. The overall aim of thinking fluently in English can feel huge and overwhelming, but if you break it down, you can create mini victories that keep you motivated. Your goals could be very specific. For example, this week I will narrate my breakfast. Preparation in English every morning. Today, during my 10-minute thinking prompt session, I will try to use at least 3 new vocabulary words I learned recently. By the end of this month, I want to be able to internally describe my route to work, school entirely in English without translating. When you achieve one of these small goals, acknowledge it. Give yourself a mental pat on the back. This positive reinforcement helps you build momentum and confidence. It shows you that you are making progress, even if it feels slow sometimes. Tracking these small successes can be very encouraging. Another useful practice is to mentally review and revisit topics you've thought about before. Think of it as a kind of mental spaced repetition. Perhaps last week you tried to think about your favorite hobby in English, and you struggled to find the right words for certain aspects. This week, try thinking about that same hobby again. Can you express yourself more clearly now? Have you learned any new vocabulary that helps? This review process does a couple of things. First, it reinforces what you've learned. Revisiting thoughts and trying to articulate them again helps to solidify those neural pathways. Second, it can be a great way to see your own progress. You might be surprised at how much easier it is to think about a topic the second or third time around. This awareness of improvement is a powerful motivator. So far, we focused a lot on forming individual thoughts and sentences, but natural thinking often involves connecting ideas. To make your internal English more flowing and sophisticated, start paying attention to and practicing with linking words and transitional phrases. These are the words and short phrases that help you connect one idea to the next. Even simple connectors make a big difference. And to add information, e.g., I woke up and I made coffee. But to show contrast, e.g., I wanted to go out but it was raining. So, to show a result, e.g., it was raining, so I stayed home. Because to give a reason, e.g., I stayed home because it was raining. Then, after that, to show sequence, e.g., I made coffee, then I read the news. I read the news. After that, I started work. However, also for contrast, often more formal, e.g., the movie was long. However, it was very interesting. Start by consciously trying to use these simple connectors in your internal narration and your responses to thinking prompts. When you describe your day, don't just list separate actions. I woke up, I brushed my teeth, I had breakfast. Try to link them. I woke up, and then I brushed my teeth. After that, I had breakfast. As you become more comfortable, you can start to incorporate more advanced linking phrases that you pick up from your active listening and reading, such as, on the other hand, in addition to, for example, as a result, furthermore, meanwhile, practicing. With these connecting words doesn't just make your internal monologue sound more natural, it actually helps you to structure your thoughts more clearly in English. You begin to think in terms of cause and effect, contrast, addition, and sequence, using the specific linguistic tools that English provides for these functions. This is a significant step towards thinking more deeply and complexly in the language. It moves you beyond simply labeling your world in English to actually reasoning and developing ideas within an English framework. This ability to weave thoughts together is fundamental to fluent internal and eventually external communication. This internal structuring prepares you for more elaborate expressions when you decide to speak or write. This ability to connect ideas smoothly within your thoughts is what truly elevates your internal English. Think about how much of our daily thinking involves comparing things, making choices, or explaining reasons. Learning to do this fluidly in English in your head is a game changer. To really get good at this, try to actively practice making comparisons and expressing preferences in English in your mind. This isn't just about using and or but. It's about using comparative and superlative structures and phrases for giving opinions. For example, when you're looking at two items in a shop, mentally compare them in English. This shirt is nicer than that one. That one is cheaper, but this one is better quality. I think this is the best option because when you're deciding what to eat, I prefer tea to coffee in the morning. Pizza sounds more appealing than salad right now. This restaurant is as good as the other one, but it's closer. Or when you're thinking about activities. Going for a walk is healthier than watching TV. I enjoy reading more than I enjoy cleaning. This book is less interesting than the last one I read. Actively forming these kinds of comparative thoughts trains your brain to use these important grammatical structures automatically. It also makes your internal monologue more dynamic and reflective of how you actually think when making decisions. Don't just observe, evaluate, and compare in English. Beyond comparisons, consciously practice forming opinions and giving reasons for them in English, all within your head. This is where those linking words like because, so, therefore, and phrases like I think, that, in my opinion, the reason for this is, become incredibly useful. When you read an article or watch a news report, don't just passively absorb it. Stop and think. What is my opinion on this topic? I think that your opinion, because your reason. I agree with this point, but I disagree with that point because even with simple, everyday things, I like this color because it's bright and cheerful. I don't want to go out tonight because I'm tired. This is a good idea. However, it might be difficult to implement. This practice of forming and justifying opinions in English in your mind is crucial. It helps you develop the ability to articulate your thoughts more completely, not just state facts. It also prepares you for discussions and debates should you choose to engage in them. You're building the mental habit of constructing arguments and explanations in English. To make this practice even more effective, try to anticipate counter-arguments or different perspectives in your head. For example, if you think, I believe public transport should be free, then also try to think, however, someone else might argue that it would be too expensive for the city because this kind of mental debate with yourself pushes your English thinking to a higher level. It forces you to consider different angles and to find the English words and structures to express more complex, nuanced ideas. Now, let's talk about a common challenge. What happens when you're trying to think in English and you keep reverting to your native language? This slipping back is perfectly normal, especially in the early stages, or when you're tired or distracted. Don't get discouraged by it. The first step is simply to notice when it happens. Awareness is key. When you catch yourself thinking in your native language after you've consciously decided to think in English, just gently guide your thoughts back to English. Don't scold yourself. Just make a mental note. Oops, I switched. Let's go back to English. One strategy to help with. This is to choose specific times or specific activities where you will only think in English. For example, you might decide, for the next 15 minutes while I'm walking the dog, I will only think in English, no exceptions. Or, whenever I am making my morning coffee, that is my English thinking time. By setting these clear boundaries, you train your brain to stay in English mode for that defined period. It's like creating a little English-only zone in your mind. If you find yourself consistently slipping back, it might also be a sign that you're trying to think about things that are too complex too soon. If you're trying to ponder deep philosophical questions in English before you're comfortable narrating your breakfast, you're likely to revert. Go back to simpler thoughts and build up gradually. Ensure your foundational internal English is strong before tackling very abstract or complicated topics. Another very helpful technique is to label your environment in English. We talked about thinking the English words for objects around you. Take this a step further. You can physically put little sticky notes with English names on things in your home or office. Door, window, computer, refrigerator, plant. When you see the object, you see the English word. This constant visual reminder helps to reinforce the English vocabulary and keeps your brain primed for English. It sounds simple, but it can be surprisingly effective in creating an English-speaking atmosphere around you, which in turn supports your efforts to think in English. As you become more comfortable with internal monologues and dialogues, consider incorporating mental storytelling. This means trying to create or retell simple stories entirely in your head, using English. You could summarize a movie you watched or a book you read in your own English words. Imagine a simple fictional scenario and narrate what happens. Once upon a time, there was a small cat who lived in a big city. Think about a funny or interesting event from your own life and try to recount it in English in your mind. Storytelling naturally involves sequence. Then, next, after that, descriptions, characters, and sometimes even dialogue. Practicing this Mentally is excellent for linking ideas, using descriptive language, and practicing different tenses, past, present, future. Again, start simple. Your mental stories don't need to be literary masterpieces. The goal is the process of constructing a narrative in English. This mental storytelling helps to build fluency in thought because it requires you to sustain a line of thinking for a longer period, connecting various pieces of information and description. It also often taps into your imagination, which can make the practice more engaging. All these techniques, making comparisons, forming opinions, handling slipbacks, labeling your environment, and mental storytelling are designed to make your internal English more active, more complex, and more habitual. They encourage you to move beyond just translating individual words and towards genuinely operating and reasoning within the English language framework in your mind. Remember, consistency is far more important than intensity. A little bit of focused English thinking practice every day will yield much better results than sporadic long sessions. You are gradually changing a deeply ingrained habit, the habit of thinking primarily in your native language. This takes time and patience, but with each small effort, with each conscious decision to think in English, you are strengthening that new pathway, making English not just a language you learn, but a language you live in, starting from the inside out. This internal comfort and familiarity with English is the fertile ground from which all other English skills will grow more easily and more naturally. It becomes less of a foreign language and more of another language your brain can use with ease. Your brain can use with ease. And when English starts to feel like just another language for your thoughts, rather than a foreign one, you'll notice a significant shift in how you approach learning and using it. The pressure lessens and the enjoyment grows. One aspect that can greatly support this internal shift is to actively use English for planning and problem solving in your daily life. These are very practical, real-world applications of thinking that we all do constantly. By consciously doing them in English, you make English a functional tool for your mind. For example, when you need to plan your day or your week, try to do it in English, in your head, or even by writing a to-do list. In English, think, okay, first thing tomorrow morning, I need to finish that report. Then, I have to go to the bank. After that, I should call my friend. In the evening, I want to relax and watch a movie. You're using modal verbs, need to, have to, should, want to, sequencing words and future intentions, all within a practical English framework. When you encounter a small problem, try to think through the solution in English. Let's say you can't find your glasses. Your internal monologue in English might go, "Where are my glasses? I think I left them on the kitchen table. No, not there. Maybe they are in my bag. Let me check. Ah, yes, here they are. I should be more careful next time." This involves hypothesizing, I think, maybe, checking, finding a solution, and even a bit of self-reflection, all in English. Even for more complex problem solving, like figuring out the best way to complete a task at work or for a personal project, try to outline the steps and consider different options in English in your mind. To solve this first, I could try option A. However, that might be too slow. Another idea is option B, which would be faster, but it might require more resources. Perhaps the best approach is to combine elements of both. This kind of thinking pushes you to use conditional language, could, might, comparative language, faster, and phrases for presenting ideas. Another idea is, perhaps the best approach is, using English for these everyday mental tasks of planning and problem solving makes the language incredibly relevant and practical. It's not just an academic exercise. It's a tool that helps you organize your life and make decisions. This practical application deeply embeds English into your thought processes. To further enhance this, start setting your digital environment to English. This is a powerful, passive immersion technique that constantly exposes you to English throughout your day. Change the language settings on your phone to English. Change the language on your computer operating system to English. Change the language. Settings on your social media apps and frequently visited websites to English, if available. At first, this might feel a little challenging. You might have to look up a few words for menu items or settings, but you'll be surprised how quickly you adapt, and the benefit is huge. Every time you use your phone or computer, you'll be seeing and interacting with English. You'll learn common tech vocabulary naturally. You'll get used to reading instructions and notifications in English. This constant, low-level exposure reinforces English in your mind without you even having to actively study. It makes English a normal part of your daily digital interactions, which for many of us is a significant part of our lives. Now, as you get more comfortable thinking in English about your own life and your immediate surroundings, it's time to gradually expand the topics you think about in English. Don't just stick to your daily routine or simple observations. Start pushing your mental boundaries. Try thinking in English about news and current events. After reading or hearing a news story, ideally in English, try to summarize it in your head in English. What are the main points? What is your opinion on it? Your hobbies and interests at a deeper level. If you like movies, don't just think, that was a good movie. Try to think about why it was good. The plot was very engaging because the acting was convincing, especially the performance of, I liked the cinematography. For instance, the scene where abstract concepts. This is more advanced, but as you progress, you can start trying to think about ideas like friendship, happiness, success, or challenges in English. What does friendship mean to me? I think a good friend is someone who work or study-related topics. If you use English for work or study, try to mentally prepare for meetings, presentations, or think through complex concepts related to your field in English. The key is to gradually increase the complexity and range of topics. This challenges your vocabulary and your ability to form more sophisticated thoughts in English. If you find a topic too difficult to think about in English, that's okay. It just means you might need to build up more vocabulary or familiarity with that specific area first. You can always come back to it later. A really fun and effective way to do this, and to combine it with speaking practice, is to have imaginary conversations with different people in English in your head. We talked about simple dialogues, but now try to make them more specific or challenging. Imagine you're explaining something complex to someone in English. How would you break it down? What words would you use? Imagine you're having a friendly debate with someone whose opinion differs from yours. How would you express your points politely but firmly? How would you respond to their arguments? Imagine you're being interviewed for a job in English. How would you answer common interview questions? These imaginary conversations are like mental rehearsals. They help you practice not just forming sentences, but also adapting your language for different situations and different audiences. You can try out different ways of saying things without any real-world pressure. As you engage in these more complex thinking exercises, it's also beneficial to reflect on your thinking process itself. After you've spent some time thinking in English about a particular topic, take a moment to ask yourself, what was easy about that? What was difficult? Were there any words or phrases I struggled to find? If so, make a note to look them up. Did my thoughts flow smoothly, or did I get stuck often? How could I express these ideas more clearly or more naturally next time? This kind of metacognition, thinking about your thinking, is a powerful learning tool. It helps you identify areas where you need more practice and allows you to consciously work on improving your internal English fluency. It's like being your own language coach. Finally, remember that the goal isn't to eliminate your native language from your thoughts entirely. That's usually unrealistic and unnecessary for most people. Being bilingual or multilingual is a wonderful asset. The aim is to develop the ability to think directly and comfortably in English when you want or need to, so that it becomes a natural and efficient mode of thought for you, reducing the need for constant translation. It's about adding another powerful tool to your mental toolkit. It's about making English an integral part of how you process the world, how you learn, and how you prepare to communicate. The more you practice these active mental strategies, the more English will feel like home for your thoughts. This internal mastery is the foundation that makes all external communication, speaking, listening, reading, and writing feel more intuitive and less like a constant struggle. You're not just learning a language, you're cultivating an English-thinking mind. This process of internalizing the language structure and vocabulary through active thought is what creates that effortless feel when the words finally come out. And this internal comfort is a continuous journey of small, consistent steps. And as you take these steps, you're not only improving your ability to think in English, but you're also sharpening your overall cognitive skills. Learning to switch between modes of thought and to process information in different linguistic frameworks can actually enhance your mental flexibility and problem-solving abilities in general. Now, let's consider the role of reading extensively in English as a support for thinking in English. While active listening helps you internalize the sounds and rhythms of spoken English, reading provides you with a vast exposure to how thoughts are structured in writing, how vocabulary is used in diverse contexts, and how complex ideas are developed. When you read, you're essentially observing someone else's thought process laid out on the page. Pay attention not just to the story or the information, but also to how the writer expresses their ideas. Notice sentence structures. Are they simple or complex? How are different clauses connected? Look for vocabulary. How are new or interesting words used in context? Can you infer their meaning before looking them up? Observe paragraph structure. How are main ideas introduced and supported with details? Or examples? Pay attention to tone and style. Is the writing formal or informal? Persuasive or descriptive? The more you read, the more these patterns will become familiar to you. And this familiarity seeps into your own thinking. When you've seen a particular phrase or sentence structure multiple times in your reading, it becomes more likely that you'll be able to retrieve it and use it in your own internal English monologue or when you're trying to form a thought. Choose. Reading materials that genuinely interest you. This makes the process enjoyable rather than a chore. It could be novels, news articles, blogs, magazines, nonfiction books on topics you're passionate about, anything. The key is volume and consistency. The more exposure you get to well-written English, the more English-like your own internal thoughts will start to become. You're essentially stocking your mental library with examples of how to think and express yourself in English. While reading, you can also actively engage your thinking in English skills. Pause after a paragraph or a page and try to summarize what you just read in your own English words. In your head, ask yourself questions about the text in English. What is the main idea here? What do I think will happen next? Do I agree with this point? If you encounter a new word, try to understand it from the context first, then perhaps look it up in your English dictionary, and then try to use it in a mental sentence of your own. This active engagement turns reading from a passive activity into a dynamic thinking exercise. It's not just about decoding words. It's about interacting with ideas in English. Another very powerful technique, especially for those who enjoy writing or journaling, is to start writing your thoughts in English. This could be a private journal, notes, or even just short reflections. Writing is, in many ways, thinking on paper or on a screen. When you write, you are forced to organize your thoughts, choose your words carefully, and construct coherent sentences and paragraphs. Start small. You don't have to write essays. You could write a few sentences at the end of each day, summarizing what you did or how you felt in English. You could keep a gratitude journal where you write down 3 things you're thankful for each day in English. If you're planning something, try writing out your plan or your to-do list in English. If you have an opinion about something, try writing a short paragraph expressing it in English. The act of writing slows down the thinking process in a useful way. It gives you time to search for the right words and to think about sentence structure. When you just think in your head, thoughts can be fleeting and sometimes jumbled. Writing them down helps to make them more concrete and organized. And when you read back what you've written, you can often see areas where you could improve your phrasing or clarity. This self-correction process is invaluable. Don't worry about perfection in your private writing. The goal is practice, the practice of forming and expressing thoughts in English. Over time, as you write more, you'll find that it becomes easier to articulate your thoughts in English, both on paper and in your head. The skills are transferable. Let's also talk about using visualization with English. This can be particularly helpful when you're trying to learn new vocabulary or internalize concepts. When you learn a new English word, especially for a concrete object or action, try to create a vivid mental image associated with it. For example, if you learn the word stroll, don't just memorize the definition to walk in a slow, relaxed way. Imagine yourself or someone else strolling through a park. See the slow pace, the relaxed posture, the pleasant surroundings. By linking the word to a mental image, you create a stronger memory trace. You can also use visualization when you're narrating your day or practicing storytelling in your head. As you describe an action or a scene in English, try to see it clearly in your mind's eye. This helps to make your internal English more vivid and engaging. It connects the language to sensory experiences, which can aid comprehension and recall. Sometimes, when trying to think in English, you might encounter a concept that feels difficult to express because it's very tied to your own culture or a way of thinking in your native language. This is where it's helpful to learn about cultural nuances embedded in English. Language and culture are deeply intertwined. Understanding some of the cultural assumptions or common ways of thinking in English-speaking cultures can sometimes help you understand why certain phrases are used or why ideas are expressed in a particular way. This doesn't mean you have to adopt a different culture. But being aware of these nuances can make it easier to think in a way that sounds natural in English. For example, levels of directness or politeness can vary between cultures and are reflected in language. Learning common English expressions for making requests politely or for disagreeing gently can be very useful. This awareness can be gained through reading, watching movies, or TV shows from different English-speaking countries, and interacting with native speakers if you have the opportunity. Finally, be patient and persistent. Learning to think in a new language is a significant cognitive shift. It won't happen overnight. There will be days when it feels easy and your thoughts flow smoothly in English. And there will be days when it feels like a struggle and you keep reverting to your native tongue. This is all part of the process. The key is not to give up. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Acknowledge the effort you're putting in. Every time you consciously choose to think in English, even for a few minutes, you are reinforcing that skill. Think of it like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Trust that your brain is capable of this. Humans are wired for language, and with consistent effort and the right strategies, you can train your brain to think comfortably and effectively in English. This internal fluency will transform your relationship with the language, making it a true tool for thought, expression, and connection. It will become less of a subject you study and more of a world you inhabit. And this internal world building is a continuous, rewarding journey. A continuous, rewarding journey. And as you progress on this journey, you'll find that your confidence in using English in all situations, not just in your internal thoughts, will grow substantially. This happens because you're building a deep, intrinsic understanding of the language, not just a superficial layer of memorized rules and vocabulary. One important aspect to consider as your internal English becomes more developed is how to handle thinking about emotions in English. Expressing and understanding emotions is a nuanced part of any language. Initially, you might find it easier to think about factual things in English, your daily routine, observations, plans. But as you become more comfortable, try to consciously label and explore your feelings in English. When you feel happy, think, "I feel happy right now." Or try to be more specific. "I feel joyful. I feel content. I'm excited." When you feel sad, think, "I'm feeling a bit down." Or, "I'm sad about this." When you're angry, try to articulate it internally. "I'm frustrated. This makes me angry because..." Why is this important? Because emotions are a huge part of our internal experience. If you only think about emotions in your native language, you're keeping a significant part of your inner world separate from English. Learning to process and label your feelings in English helps to make the language feel more personal and more deeply integrated into your being. It also helps you understand emotional expressions when you hear or read them in English. You'll start to connect the English words for emotions with the actual feelings themselves, rather than just translating them. This builds empathy and understanding in communication. This doesn't mean you need to have intense emotional outpourings in English, in your head all the time. It's more about gently starting to use English vocabulary for the range of human feelings you experience. You can look up lists of feeling words in English and try to use them when appropriate in your internal monologue. Another area to explore as your thinking skills develop is using English for creative thinking and brainstorming. Many people find that trying to think about a problem or generate new ideas in a second language can actually unlock different perspectives and lead to more creative solutions. This is because different languages often have different structures and associations, which can prompt your brain to make new connections. So, if you have a problem you're trying to solve, or if you're looking for new ideas for a project, try dedicating some time to brainstorming about it entirely in English. Just let your thoughts flow freely. Write down any ideas that come to mind in English without judging them. You might be surprised at what you come up with. You're essentially using the English language framework as a different lens through which to view the situation. This can be particularly useful for people in creative fields, but it's a valuable exercise for anyone looking to enhance their problem-solving skills. It takes English thinking beyond just narration and into the realm of innovation and ideation. Now, let's address a common concern. Will thinking in English negatively affect my native language? For the vast majority of adult learners, the answer is no. Your native language is deeply ingrained. Learning to think in another language generally adds to your cognitive abilities rather than detracting from your first language. In fact, some studies suggest that being bilingual or multilingual can have cognitive benefits, such as improved executive function. What might happen occasionally is a phenomenon called code switching, where you might momentarily insert an English word into a sentence in your native language, or vice versa, especially if you're tired or if a particular concept is more easily expressed in one language than the other for you at that moment. This is very common among bilinguals and is usually not a sign of language loss, but rather a feature of how bilingual brains manage multiple language systems. The goal is to become proficient in thinking in English so you can do it when needed, not to replace your native language thought processes entirely. Both can coexist and enrich your mental life. As you become more adept at thinking in English, you'll likely find that your listening comprehension improves even more dramatically. This is because you're no longer just translating what you hear. Your brain is already operating in English mode. You can process spoken English faster and more directly. You'll start to catch nuances, humor, and implied meanings more easily, because your internal thought patterns are aligning more closely with the patterns of the language being spoken. This creates a positive feedback loop. Thinking in English helps you understand spoken English better, and understanding spoken English better provides you with more input and models for your own English thinking. To further enhance this, try to predict what someone is going to say when you're listening to English conversations, podcasts, or watching movies. Based on the context and what has already been said, try to anticipate the next phrase or idea in English in your mind. This active prediction keeps your brain highly engaged and helps you process information more quickly. Even if your prediction isn't always correct, the act of trying to predict in English strengthens your processing skills. Another useful practice is to mentally paraphrase or rephrase what you hear or read in English. After someone says something or after you read a complex sentence, try to express the same idea in simpler English words or a different sentence structure in your head. For example, if you hear a news reporter say, "The economic indicators suggest a period of sustained fiscal austerity," you might mentally paraphrase it as, "So, it looks like the country will have to spend less money for a while." This act of paraphrasing forces you to process the meaning deeply and then re-encode it using your own active English vocabulary and sentence structures. It's an excellent test of your understanding and a great way to practice flexible thinking in English. Finally, remember that celebrating your progress is vital for long-term motivation. Thinking in English is an internal skill, so it's not always as visible as improvements in speaking or writing. Therefore, you need to be your own cheerleader. Acknowledge those moments when you realize you've been thinking in English without consciously trying. Notice when you understand a joke in an English movie without needing subtitles or translation. Recognize when you can follow a fast-paced English conversation more easily than before. These are all signs that your internal English is growing stronger. You could even keep a simple progress journal where you occasionally write down these small victories or observations about your English thinking. Looking back on this can be incredibly encouraging during those times when you might feel like you're not progressing as fast as you'd like. The journey to thinking fluently in English is a marathon, not a sprint. It's built on consistent small efforts and a willingness to engage with the language in a deep and personal way. It's about transforming English from a set of rules to be memorized into a living, breathing tool for your mind. Every thought you consciously form in English, every internal dialogue you have, every mental plan you make is a step towards making English a natural and effortless part of your cognitive landscape. This internal shift is perhaps the most profound and empowering aspect of language learning, opening up new ways of seeing the world and expressing yourself within it. It's a quiet revolution that happens within your own mind, paving the way for more confident and articulate communication with the wider world.